Last meeting, I was in attendance, and I'm really here to listen. And the topic of education came up, and we discussed what would be coming forward at this meeting. Essentially, what you will find today is the purpose for the framework that you have. And I just want to make sure that you have an understanding that the documents that you've received today are, it's a living, breathing document. It's the very first start of the work for your board's consideration, and it really has to evolve and change based upon how the DDA wants to be able to proceed. And it has a lot of information for you to be able to absorb. Today I'm going to provide you an overview of the document, provide you some key points to be able to look at, and some initial follow-up steps that you need to be able to consider if you want to be able to proceed on. So the purpose of the framework is really taking a look at promoting developing education priorities focused on strengthening and promoting the vitality of downtown Miami. And your education master plan, your master plan really has a specific goal in it linked to education. Now, everything that I have within the plan addresses an alignment with other similar efforts as well. Now, through the past month, I've been reaching out to key partners, including Miami-Dade College, Miami-Dade County Public Schools, Downtown Miami Charter School, and you see them all listed there. And essentially, I recommend that this is a group that you really need to be able to have at the table when talking about key education initiatives. So the approach to the framework, and the way that I've approached it, is you have to be able to define the scope of the targeted families. Who are we talking about? And the way that I've approached it, and for your consideration, are the residents, greater downtown Miami, which is within the data that we're going to talk about, as well as the workforce of downtown Miami. Additionally, we have to be able to figure out what are the needs and interests of the families in downtown. And the question is, what information do we know? And then also, what information do we still need to gather? Also, an inventorying of current work and identifying established partnerships. So, within the work that I've done, I've decided to be able to use the data that you use so that you can be able to have a comparison of apples to apples. So you'll see in the report that you can be able to look at more closely in the weeks to come. Really addresses the demographic report from the DDA. It addresses the residential real estate market study from the DDA. And it also uses Census Bureau data linked to the workforce and capacity and school achievement data from Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So the question is, what does the data reflect? What community does it encompass? All of your demographics address the greater downtown Miami area. And this includes all the neighborhoods that you see listed there, which you all know very well because this is the nature of your work. The plan's findings and recommendations are based upon the greater downtown Miami area. And the issuance of a survey, which is one of the very first steps, and it was discussed at the last meeting, is something you have to consider. If the data reflects greater downtown Miami, where is the survey going to be distributed? How will it be distributed? How can you be able to ensure that it's statistically sound? So the approach is cradle to industry approach. And this may sound a little bit like education jargon. But the reason that we're approaching it, the reason that I recommend approaching it this way, is that you have families that have infants. You have families that have toddlers. You have families that have school-age children. And you also have adults and adults that want to be able to be trained, as well as industries that need to be able to have a talented workforce. And so with that, the whole entire plan is structured on two key goals. One, the industries, the development of a talent pool prepared to address the industry standards that you are trying to be able to target, as well as taking a look at the school options, educational options for parents that have 0 to 12th graders, and trying to be able to consider not only their current needs, but trying to be able to consider long-term planning principles as well. So within the report, you'll find, and this you can look at later, but on page 6, you're going to see some education priorities. You're going to be able to see some guiding questions that should be able to be considered for the guiding of all the different work. So the way that the report is structured, it really aligns with each section: early learning, pre-K through 12, and adult, and you have findings, and you also have recommendations. So the early learning findings. In your report, you'll find that in 2010, your demographics report said that you had for 0 to 4-year-olds, you had a little bit more than 3,600 children living in downtown Miami. With that being said, in 2014, you had 4,135 0 to 4-year-olds. So that's an increase of about 500 children. And so the question is, if you have 13 child care centers in the DDA boundaries, and you have that map as an appendix, so you can take a look at that later on, is that sufficient? Is there a need to be able to advocate for, or at least help facilitate conversations with providers to see if that needs to be brought forth? But the question is that really a need? And so that needs to be integrated within the survey. So recommendations. When you're distributing the survey, I recommend that you include questions linked to the child care child care needs. I also believe that you should, if the survey, as the survey results come in, there's an organization called the Early Learning Coalition. The Early Learning Coalition coordinates child care services across Miami-Dade and Monroe County. They are a good a good group to be able to turn to for expertise in this area. If you need to be able to touch bases regarding who could be able to provide the services, who has the capacity to be able to have startup costs to start services downtown, and move forward from there. And then if the need is determined from the survey results, you can be able to explore that with the Early Learning Coalition, explore how you can facilitate private industry to come down here, but you also have the possibility of collaborating with the school district because they also have programming for 0 to 4-year-olds. So pre-K 12 findings. So you talk about capacity and the growth and need. In 2010, and this is on page 8 within your report, you'll see the data. 2010, you had about 6,100 school-age children. In 2014, you had about 8,000 school-age children. With that means that about close to 1,900 additional children in the Greater Miami downtown area. With that, the next question should be, do the feeder pattern schools have the capacity to be able to meet this current population? In checking and working with the school district, I've been able to confirm that all neighborhood feeder schools have the capacity to be able to substantially take in additional students. With that being said, there's another conclusion. The second finding is more than half of the students in greater downtown Miami are actually their families are availing themselves of choices of school choice if they're choosing public school. And if they're availing themselves of that, I can only tell you this, and there's some interesting maps, also Appendix A and Appendix B that you can take a look at later, that demonstrate where folks are living in downtown and also what schools listing out, what schools they're choosing to be able to attend. They don't correlate student by student because you can't have that, that's personal data, but it most certainly sees the trends of what their choices are. But what I do want to be able to highlight is that this is not a unique trend for downtown Miami. What happens is the whole Miami-Dade County, and actually throughout the country, school choice is where folks are at. Parents are considering school choice as something that they want to be able to consider as an option. And so on page 17 of your report, you'll find the countywide trends for school choice. And that you'll see that they actually have trends that demonstrate more than 50% of families across the entire county are not choosing to be, they're making their own personal choices based upon school choice options.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you're saying that there's sufficient good school capacity in downtown Miami? I mean, is that, I'm just trying to, is that the...
So here, this is the dichotomy, right? You have, the question is there overcrowding? Is there overcrowding regarding the development that's taking place downtown? Right. And the bottom line about neighborhood feeder pattern schools, the point is no. There is capacity to be able to take additional students in neighborhood feeder pattern schools.
Lisa, how large is the feeder pattern boundary?
I can be able to give you that information as a follow-up, and I can take it as a note so that you can be able to see it, but so I can follow up with that.
That can make a big difference.
Okay, so then, what are the boundaries, right?
What does the feeder part mean?
So that includes the high school, the middle school, and elementary schools.
So if I'm thinking about moving in Brickell, and I'm saying I want my kids to go to good public schools, I could look around and find good local schools with plenty of capacity to get in.
So you have your choice, you have a variety of different choices. And this is why I want to make sure that you see what's presented here. Because it's a dichotomy, right?
Pardon me, yeah, please. talk about the feeder pattern for a minute, Lisa.
Mhm.
I think what's considered, so for instance, when you're doing residential development in this county, you have to have school concurrency. And the school board will make a determination if there is capacity within the feeder pattern. And that feeder pattern is a pattern that goes from the high school on down. So let's just take, for instance, at the high school level, if you're doing a project in North Bay Village, at Miami Beach Senior High School, which is your closest high school, does not have capacity. The alternate school is Alonzo Mourning in North Miami. And it repeats this down the food chain to middle school and elementary school as well. And for purposes of getting development approvals, that capacity exists, because you can meet it 10, 12 miles away. But in terms of actually providing options that are meaningful to the people who are living here, the feeder patterns are really not necessarily relevant. And I just wonder if this analysis gets into that.
So when we talk about feeder patterns and the geographic boundaries, this is taking account the geographic space, right, and being able to have an understanding of how that, what they currently have as attendance boundaries and what school you're supposed to go to if you're going to your neighborhood schools. Your question about what are those boundaries is an important one, just for the board to be able to have an understanding, and I can make sure that you get that.
Because, for instance, if you're doing a project in Miami Beach, let's say in North Beach, Biscayne Elementary is the convenient school, but it's over capacity. If South Point Elementary, which is in the same feeder pattern, has capacity, then you're considered to have capacity within the feeder pattern.
Right.
So that number is, for what we're trying to achieve here, is not necessarily a helpful number.
So
if I buy a place on Brickell, and I wanna know where my kids are gonna go to school, there's a place, that's what I'm trying to.
It may not be the school on Carl Way.
Well, that's my point.
That may be over capacity, but there may be a school 5 miles away
I
that's
just,
within
when
the
you say
feeder
feeder pattern, when everybody talks about feeder pattern, when it really sort of boils down, like, I live on Brickell, my kid's going there. Or is there, then if that's full, then there, if that's full, then there, then there, then. But
So-
I've got capacity, according to some bureaucratic chart.
So I would only say,
Wait, let them say something.
I'm sorry.
I'm
One
sorry.
quick thing, the information that you garnered here, I think it needs to be up on the DDA website for several things, because I've run into a lot of customers that they moved in as a couple and they're moving out as a family. And they've said to me, we don't know where to send our kids to school, or there's not enough schools in the area, or I would rather have my child go to another school. I think we need to have a link on our site that if you do live in downtown in the CBD or in Brickell or in an area within our district, what schools you can go down and list them down the feeder list that you have, so that information is out there. I didn't know what to answer to these people, but I've seen it on more than a handful of occasions where I will see them 3 or 4 years later and they say, no, I moved out of downtown. Why? Oh, we got a kid now, we're in the suburbs. And that, we have to tackle that stigma, because these people that are moving out are the people that know the downtown area, that shop in downtown, that spend their time here, and next thing you know, you're losing a very good downtowner to Coral Gables or South Miami.
Can you, your study uses what geographical boundaries you're using? Are you using central business district? Are you including Brickell? Are you going north?
Okay, so the way that we had made sure to look at it from, well, I have made sure to look at it from the greater downtown Miami area, but there is, the same conclusions are evident regarding capacity for the DDA boundaries. Okay, and so I can only, I want to make sure that I state the dichotomy within the situation that we have here. We have neighborhood feeder pattern schools that, in fact, don't have that trickle effect regarding capacity interest right now. However, you do find a completely consistent trend in downtown families that decide to be able to stay living in downtown, maximizing their options for school choice, just like families across the county. Now, you did mention that you want to be able to see what other options related to recommendations on how to be able to expand potential choices and options for downtown, and that would be the next slide, but let me know if when you're ready to be able to proceed to that slide.
Let's let Al, and then let's Lucy go, and then we'll move to the next slide.
Just relative to the boundaries, we all know what the DDA boundaries is. What is the boundary of Grado?
Now, I'm not going to be the expert on your demographic data, but in that demographic report that you have, that's on the table today, it's inclusive of Brickell, Central Business District, Arts and Entertainment District, Wynwood, Edgewater, and Overtown.
Said another way, it's essentially Julia Tuttle Causeway down to
Is there a map page 4?
and across I-95.
Okay, so it's on page 4?
Page 4, the demographic. This report that's in the center.
I think you have it. This report.
You'll also in Appendix A and B, you'll see boundaries regarding where families live with school-age children for DDA boundaries as well as greater downtown Miami.
So all of the colored areas in this map are considered to be within the feeder pattern for schools within.
Right.
Okay.
Are you ready?
And I can most certainly I could most certainly find that data that was asked for regarding the feed.
Ready?
Okay. So for pre-K-12 recommendations, and these were developed and proffered jointly with the different partners that we've been talking about. For the first one, the iPrep Academy. I want to make sure that you see a data page on page 19 of your report that demonstrates, that provides you a description of the iPrep Academy. Some of you had the opportunity to be able to visit it. Others have heard some about it, but the report does provide you detailed information about the iPrep Academy as well as its consistent rigor as well as academic success and strong placement regarding academic achievement amongst other schools within the district. And that's at the heart of downtown. With that being said, at the school site visit, it was stated that that school is going to expand to a pre-K-12 model, and that will add an additional 600 seats. At that, it's for you to consider as a potential recommendation, for you to be able to, before it kind of cycles into the whole magnet application process, to be able to see, do you want to negotiate some seats along with the city of Miami for downtown residents or workforce?
We're talking about, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your sentence, but is that regarding the visit we took?
Yes.
And they're increasing the capacity by 600 students.
Expanding pre-K to 12, that would be the expansion.
600 students. And the question is, will those be dedicated for magnet programs, or will there be some set-asides for just geographically desirable people?
That's my recommendation, is for the board to consider the action step of being able to negotiate a dedicated block of student stations so that they would be dedicated to residents and potentially for those that work downtown.
Why do you use the word negotiate?
Because honestly, there's been examples. There's been examples. I won't go there because you need to be able to talk about it with them. I'm not quite sure what the negotiations and how the negotiations would unfold, but when you talk about successful models, there is a successful model in the village of Key Biscayne of being able to have a dedicated block of student seats in the Mass Academy High School. So that's just a successful
Because
example.
theoretically, someone could live across the street from it and be left out of that school.
Right, because it's a magnet school. But now, but because of the fact that that municipality, or in this example, it could be the city of Miami and the DDA potentially negotiating for the similar access, so that if you're in downtown, you know that those spots could be able to be accessible only to downtown residents.
Who is the ultimate decision maker during this process?
First, the negotiating, I assume, would have to be in partnership with the City of Miami, and then both governing boards, I would have to, my assumption is that it would have to be approved by the school board. Okay. The next recommendation is to support and promote success of existing community feeder pattern schools. In the report, you will see on page 15 an extensive investment from Florida International University and Miami-Dade County Public Schools regarding a strong partnership on an engineering academy, an astronomy academy in the high school, the feeder school in the high school, as well as just an investment of being able to make sure that it's the top-notch programming offerings. The next piece is developing primary learning centers, which are pre-K through 12, in the upcoming residential and commercial buildings. The exploration of being able to have just some facility space, and then it would be retrofitted and funded for programming purposes by the school district. The next one is in partnership with the school district. The DDA could be able to explore community assets, as discussed previously, municipal assets, school district assets, county assets, and being able to determine what's out there for the potential building of an urban school sites in the future. Because remember when I had said that the two goals, it's about making sure that you have short-term answers, similar to the IPAP negotiations, but also taking a look at longer-term answers and prepping for development. The next piece is support and advocate for the development of industry-focused high school programs. Linked to the Academic Leaders Council's One Community, One Goals industry programming, the school district would like to be able to develop a logistics program, a program linked to entrepreneurship, and these are at the heart, could be at the heart of downtown if there is a partnership that can be able to be solidified, and work has started there, but the DDA can be able to help support and push that forward. And we're talking about making sure that we consider all options. I made sure that I talked with the downtown Miami Charter School, the Miami Children's Museum Charter School. So in talking about what's out there, all those two schools are at capacity and with waiting lists. They're not at capacity with waiting lists with downtown residents. So some of them go, but it's not a flood of downtown residents. So that's something that we need to be able to consider too as you think about if they're going to expand. The recommendation is for you to be able to be at the table to see if that aligns with what you're trying to be able to accomplish, and if it does, to be able to take advantage of an opportunity for collaboration at the time where expansion is taking place. Because it's an important balance if you're going to advocate or build or support the expansion of a program, that you time it out with the growth of downtown Miami versus opening up and advocating for the building of programs, and then all of a sudden it's not timed down and the families are not here, and then it gets filled in magnet school style. So trying to be able to make sure that careful balance is had.
Lisa, forgive me, I mean, I'm sitting here listening to some degree, I've not read your report, candidly, but what I'm hearing now is that the need is not so great right now. It's not what we anticipated it to be.
Correct.
And certainly, if you wanted to do the economic thing, or would be to look at reserving some rooms, if you will, at iPrep, which is off the charts in terms of how good it is. So it's kind of reminds me of a meeting I had last night on contaminated parks. Perception is not reality.
Okay.
So the reality is,
Which way?
well, the reality is, good point, because it gets obscure, Richard, because lawyers, they twist things. But it seems to me the need is not so great, that there aren't as many kids we think out there. It's not a big inhibition as we might surmise. And the American model, which, Nitin certainly followed, when you have kids, you seem to want a backyard. And maybe that's not the European model, but it seems to be the American model. I think primarily because you just want to go throw them out the back every so often. But not having kids, I don't know that that's really true, but, it's the same thing with dogs, right? It's-
For the record, it was my wife who wanted a backyard. I'd love to be in a
So I'm just saying, the perception is not necessarily the reality. Jerome? That's a comment, not a.
Yep.
From the numbers I'm seeing, I mean, I think, at least the numbers you have here, that there is a need. You're 8,000 students right now. You could probably, in every age group, you could fill up a few schools downtown if we were able to keep them downtown. But you're saying that there's enough spaces in the existing schools that are rated, highly rated schools downtown, that they can go? Is that, I mean,
So when you're talking about education policy, and the way in which policy is set, you have to define boundaries of feeder patterns, and you have to be able to, then that is defined as your neighborhood feeder pattern school. Simultaneously, there's other educational choices. When you talk about the capacity and how that is determined, it's based upon the numbers, and so the numbers of enrollment. And so when you're talking about that, there is capacity. When you're talking about how do parents make their choices in downtown, or how do they make them across the county, school choice, magnet schools, career academies, charter schools are being selected by parents that choose public school. Now the question for you is do you want to be advocates for school choice options downtown?
to that point, so someone else.
You're gonna move on, then let me get Richard, and then I'm gonna come back to Denise, and then you can make another point.
I just wonder, if, like, to get your arms around this, it might be worthwhile getting, like, a simplified map where if you move into any one of these 8 locations throughout DDA area, okay, say I move into 3100 Brickell Avenue. What is my first choice? How is that school rated? What is the enrollment capacity? And then what would be my second choice? When you start talking about feeder patterns, I think there's so much blur that you can't really say. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to promote the economy downtown, and you want to get at the decision of people to move into downtown, it's going to be a simple question. They're going to be talking to a real estate agent, and they're going to be saying, what school choices do I have here? And that's going to be the sale, whether or not it's going to sell or not. And there might be something that we can develop then to either, one, identify a problem, or say it's a perception that's not true, and we should get this now out to the real estate people and sell it like that. But it would be good to have one chart where you can say, okay, here equals first choice, second choice, third, here are the ratings simultaneously, here's why I would send my kids there, sports team, whatever that goes into that calculation, but it would be helpful to see that.
Mr. Chair, please, pardon if I'm jumping a little bit ahead, since this is the focus of discussion. I think that this report needs to be, and we discussed some of it, I think this report needs to be revised with an analysis of the feeder pattern issue, because as I say, the school system has a feeder pattern which is determined capacity within the feeder pattern. That's not the way parents and residents think about it. For instance, Miami Beach, the feeder pattern included schools off of Miami Beach. That was not, someone who wants to move to Miami Beach does not think, although it is technically in the feeder pattern and there's capacity in the feeder pattern, a school off Miami Beach doesn't work. So there's no question in my mind that what people would want downtown is a convenient, highly rated school downtown. And the second thing I would like to suggest is that there be a heavy focus and emphasis on K through 8. I think, and we discussed this before, I think that is the foundation. What Jose said is absolutely true. Where downtown is losing out is when a young couple has their first kid or their second kid, and they can't find a school downtown to go to the suburbs. If there were excellent schools downtown that their kids could go to, particularly the K through 8, I mean, Key Biscayne did it spectacularly successfully, created a great K through 8 program. It's a big inducement for people to live on the Key and stay on the Key. I think we need to really focus on that more than anything else. At the high school level, people try, they have choices, but it's the young families that I think we're the ones that we're losing to downtown, and young business people who are moving downtown who maybe don't have that option. Conversely, and I've seen it with South Point Elementary, it's such a good school that it is, people try to live within the boundaries of South Point Elementary. My wife, as you know, teaches at Cushman School. She said that some people who could not afford Cushman School, not everyone can afford private school, wanted to be within the boundaries so they could go to South Point to send their kids. So my two comments are, let's really delve into the feeder pattern issue, because I don't think it's adequate for the market and the people we have here. Number two is a big focus on K through 8. If we could accomplish that, we could accomplish it all.
So to your point, the pre-K-12 model with those opening slots, I would encourage you all, we could be able to facilitate another site visit, because the PLC is really a popular program and now it's all the way to K through 5, but it's going to expand to pre-K through 12. And if you negotiate some seats in there for downtown, that might begin to address preliminarily your question.
You know, to me, and it's a little bit like Richard thinks, but it's sort of, I always think of life in a pie chart. What is the universe of people that are having kids in downtown? Of that universe of people, how many are likely to stay downtown, not because of schools, but just because some people just think a kid requires a backyard. So that universe gets smaller. From that universe then, how many of the folks that are willing to stay downtown and live in a high-rise community don't really, I don't even want to use the word care, but I don't have a better word for it, don't care that their kids are not going to have a great big football field, are not going to have the more, what do they call it, usual high school experience, and would prefer that their kids actually go to the prep school, if you will, and get an A education. Because I think you'll find when you start creating a smallest segue and sifting down into that community, you're going to find that those are probably going to likely be parents that are more likely to use that scenario than want a normal, or what do they say, the usual football field, 4 acres.
Traditional kind.
Right, I'm sorry, traditional kind of school.
That's just my.
Jerome?
So, I agree with Richard and Ethan, and to you to some degree. I think at the end of the day,
What degree do you look for?
we'll talk about that.
It sounded like you came in third.
They all very bright people, all three. Well, clearly we've got the people here. I think at the end of the day, we just need to make it easy for people to make a choice and to tell them what's available out there. I can tell you personal experience, it happens to be that at the high school and upper school level, they have some very interesting options down here for all different types, if you want to go. Art, fashion, they happen down here, happens to be a great place. There's obviously a need for it. I just don't think like we've had these issues with other matters. We just need to get the information out there so people can have a choice like that. And so we're able to tell them what's available to them. I mean, I guess what it sounds like to you, there's some highly rated schools here available to our parents that we didn't even know about.
Yeah, and I think it's really important when you talk about telling the story, even beyond the boundaries of Miami-Dade County, it's having an understanding of what school choices are available that are highly rated. When you talk about the iPrep, that's like a secret, that many people don't even really know about. And the different magnet choices that are out there. Those are important stats that if compiled appropriately could be really great marketing tools that could be able to be jointly developed and used for communicating with new businesses.
It's sort of like drip. When does data become information? And that's what Richard's saying. We have the data, but now we have to make it useful information.
Right.
Sounds like a job for the marketing committee. I haven't heard from you. Now,
Do we have a breakdown on the number of international families versus national data, domestic?
I don't, but it's interesting because the question of private schools and how and why people make choices about private schools and why they go to private schools, that's important because, so I think that information even if it's integrated within the survey process, would be helpful, just to understand why people make the choices they make as well. Okay. All right, so now going down to the industry piece and talking about adult training as well as higher education opportunities. When you talk about the Academic Leaders Council and how they have worked closely, all higher education institutions, as well as the superintendent, as well as Rick Beasley from CareerSource, they're all trying to be able to streamline their work for industries so that the talent pool here is prepared for the businesses that are being recruited here. When you talk about Miami-Dade College and Florida International University having campuses in downtown, the notion of being able to create an environment where higher education institutions consider the heart of downtown home is a priority that should potentially be considered. And talking about filling the curricular gaps for targeted industries, all the universities, college and school district are working together to be able to say, okay, there's vocational certificates, then there's higher educational opportunities. How can they be stackable? How can they be able to be concurrently accredited so that they could be able to build upon opportunities so that people can get to work quickly, but also then continue to be able to have the education that could be able to have the professional development needed for career growth.
The University of Florida has a presence in downtown
That's
Miami
right.
through Miami-Dade College, and they can get a bachelor's degree here from Fine Arts in University of Florida. You might want to make sure that that's included.
That's a very good point. It is touched upon in the section where it references Miami-Dade College in there, and it talks about the partnership that they have with New World, with the school district, as well as with UF. So but to be able to expand it within this section would be useful, because then it becomes almost like a scholarly kind of think tank opportunity in the area.
We can get Makan working on it.
Chrissy, you got 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm wrapping up. Okay, so then the recommendations for this one is to be able to make sure if there are opportunities, they're planning, collaborative opportunities that are taking place out there linked to this work, to make sure that we're just cohesive and not in working in silos as a community. Talking about making sure that targeted industries are identified, and you're going to hear about the next steps, but there's going to be a recommendation for an education advisory working group that the targeted industries should be on that working group, so that anything that evolves with the talent development pool has informed business perspective as well. When you talk about strengthening the talent development network, these educational leaders have developed what's called the talent development network, and this is almost like a matchmaking opportunity for employers and students in high school and college to be able to intern in their businesses. So if the DDA can be able to promote these opportunities for businesses to be able to engage students, that's a really valuable opportunity when you talk about trying to recruit for and I guess defend the talent that can stay here versus having to go somewhere else. And lastly, we talked about the expansion of higher education institutions in downtown Miami. So next steps, and this is the last slide. Developing an education advisory working group comprised of the DDA staff, education leaders, industry leaders, residents, and local businesses. I think it's important when you're talking about education, bless you, when you're talking about education that you have you have them at the table, and you have their input integrated in there, so it's not kind of in a vacuum based upon creating education options that are in a vacuum, not informed by educational perspective. The survey tool, this is something that was talked about at last meeting. I think that this is a really important step for the group to consider taking, so that you can be able to have data that can be able to then become information that you can be able to use for ideas. And lastly, I think it's important, especially based upon the input that I've heard from this group, that you need to be able to seek out input from industries that are considering downtown Miami as a place for home. And if they're the ones who are asking for education options and what's the status of education options, I think it's important for us to be able to ask them what is it that they're looking for before any recommendations also emerge, so that it's not completely off the mark.
I don't see on that recommendation or action steps that you are recommending that we start negotiating for the prep school.
So the way that this is structured, and this is just, to me, this is what happens like maybe in a couple of weeks. This is like right away, action steps. When you talk about the way that this report is structured, throughout the whole report, you'll see recommendations underlined. In the back, there's action steps. I would recommend that you take a look at that and highlight the ones that you want immediate action on so that you can be able to take a look at it and get to work on it. And so it's a matter of prioritizing it. It's also helpful for the education advisory group to be able to opine on the viability for short-term solutions. So then, if you bring together this group, you have them go through the recommendations and say these are the ones we need to get to work on immediately. But this framework provides you a flexible approach to priorities that you can be able to then just initially get to work, but then you can be able to add on to it too.
One stupid question, it's, with all these buildings coming up, does the Miami-Dade County Public School System have any plan to build a K-8 school or a K-12 school aside from what you've already showed us in their plans for the future?
Okay, so when you talk about the idea of
It's a yes or no, it's.
well, no, it isn't, because when I was doing this work, and when I was analyzing your residence report, your residential inventory report, you have some stuff in the pipeline, and then you have some stuff that might happen. And so to be able to build a school for capacity purposes, it needs to be done in conjunction with the business and development community. So it's a collaborative.
Do they have plans, yes or no? It's simple.
It isn't. Well, I mean, I could answer it, and then I wouldn't be telling the truth.
Any other questions?
I made my comments before about feeder pattern and K-8, but it seems to me, from everything I'm seeing that's been presented, and in terms of immediate benefit to people living downtown, that getting a large block of seats at IPREP, which is now is going to be K-12,
Pre-K through 12.
pre-K-12. It seems to me that that's the kind of school and program that if people know about that and there's availability, maybe an attraction for people to be downtown. And that seems to be something that we can get a significant block committed to downtown residents soon. That would be really good. And thank you, Lisa, your report is very thorough and
Excellent.
Thank you.
well-researched and really appreciated.
Yeah.
But that would be my thought, that getting those seats blocked out, number one.
All right, anybody else? Any other questions?
Terrific reports.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,